Raymond Weinstein, Raymond Allen Weinstein, born in New York. He was a very promising player, but his career was tragically cut short due to mental illness. Sad. He won the 1958 Junior Championship. He became an international master in 1961. He qualified for the Interzonal that year, but did not play in it. He graduated from Brooklyn College in 1963 with a degree in psychology. But it was about that time he began to manifest symptoms of mental illness. And in 1964, Raymond Weinstein murdered his roommate. He was deemed unfit to stand trial and has been confined in mental institutions ever since. Anyway, Weinstein is still alive. He's 80-something and is still currently detained at the Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center on Manhattan's Wards Island. So Bobby with E4 and Weinstein with the Sicilian defense. Pawn to C5. Then Bobby knight F3, D6, D4. Pawn takes the pawn, knight takes the pawn, gives us an open variation. Knight F6 here, knight C3, and we have a classical variation with knight C6, and Bobby Fischer with Sozin's attack. Bishop C4. This nowadays is known as Fischer-Sozin attack because Bobby played it so prolifically. E6, sort of a Taimanov setup there. Castles, Bishop E7. Now Bishop B3 and castles. Bobby played F4 right away here. The bot doesn't like that. The book move is to play Bishop E3 first, and after A6, then we get F4. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight, B5, pawn E5, showing the book line here, not what was played. Now pawn takes pawn, and pawn takes the pawn. The knight retreats to D7, and white's knight comes to E4. Black develops his final minor piece to B7, and this knight comes to D6, hitting that bishop. Of course, that's traded off with bishop takes knight and pawn takes the bishop. Here, queen G5 is played. That creates a checkmate threat against G2, defended by the light-squared bishop. And the most common defense is rook F2, although queen E2 is also frequently played. So that's the usual approach. Bobby played pawn F4 right away here. Bishop D7, and here normally when this line is played, normally knight takes knight is played by black. But Weinstein with bishop D7. Bishop E3 is now played, and knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight, and you can see we transposed back into the mainline Sozin here with the little book icon on the screen. Bishop C6, queen E2, pawn B5, knight takes the pawn, bishop takes the knight, queen takes the bishop, and knight takes the pawn on E4. Here F5 was played. I thought queen D3 would be interesting, hitting the knight. This does get a star. I was interested in this move. You get a thumbs up for that. You hit the knight, and if pawn D5 defending, then you can try to undermine the center with C4. Bobby with F5, bishop to F6. Not liked at all by the bot. Now queen D3 was played, and pawn D5 defending. Bishop takes the bishop, knight takes the bishop. Really, we can see from the eval bar, this is dead equal, isn't it? Here in this position, I like the idea of queen D4, or bringing the rook over. Bobby played C4. The bot likes rook A E1. The idea of rook A E1, by the way, is it super attacks E6, and it prevents the E-man from coming to E5. Now, queen D4 also prevents the pawn from coming to E5, but it has the added benefit of taking control of this open diagonal, which might be subjected to a check from queen B6. Either of those moves I liked, the bot not liking Bobby's move. And honestly, if I'm in Black's shoes, I'm going to play Queen B6 here, since he didn't take control of that. But Weinstein went ahead and captured, and yeah, the bot agrees with me. So after pawn takes pawn, queen takes queen, king's rook takes queen, now bishop takes the pawn on c4. Pawn e5 was played, king's rook to e1, hits that pawn, e4 moves to the shelter of the king's knight. Queen's rook to d1 puts the question to its counterpart. g6 ignores that question. Pawn takes the pawn, and the h-pawn takes the pawn. Now here, h3 keeps any idea of bringing in the knight out of Black's mind, and also gives me a nice place to tuck away if I need it. King f8, and instead with this move toward the center, Fischer decides to move toward the center. Of course, with h3 in place, there's no hitting the king and keeping him from e3. King e7. The bot calling for rook e8. I actually preferred to bring the other rook to c8, but I'm told that's inaccurate. Well, can I bring this rook to c8 then? That way I'm out. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, I should have done that to begin with. Anyway, King e8. King e3 not only adds pressure to the e-man, but it facilitates a possible rook to d2. But apparently rook takes rook is a preferable simplification for white here. Well, I don't know. I mean, you're giving your opponent the open file. So I'm not sure I understand that move for the bot, or from the bot. Here Weinstein does play rook dc8, b3 defends, now rook c5, and rook f1. Now we got this super attack against the f-man, thereby pinning the knight over here on f6. Weinstein doubles his rooks, and rook f2. Rook from c5 to c6, probably anticipating rdf1. So he wants to defend this. Now the bot prefers to transfer the rook over to the h-file. And based on that, I would suppose you could transfer either rook to the h-file. Let's see what it thinks about this move. It gives me a star. Yay. Weinstein, however, rook 5 c6. And sure enough, rdf1 is played. Right, g4. G4 is quite an interesting move, isn't it? Because it not only threatens to play G5, but it also takes control of H5. So moving the rook back to C5, for example, here, is pretty much pointless. Okay, gets an exclam. But the point is, you're not transferring here, I guess is what I'm coming to. Bobby doubling the rooks on the f-file, and rook d6 takes advantage of the now vacant d-file. So the bot's calling for a5 with the threat of a4. Rook f4. Yeah, again, this is a very interesting challenge on the d-file. If he moves back, I've got g4 again in this position. Rook f4, though, from Fischer, and rook c d8. Now h4. And now certainly g4 is a strong winning threat. So rook h8. g3 defends, rook h7. King e2, rook back to h8. Pawn a3. Now rook g8. Relinquishing the h-file. The bot calling for a5? I thought you should just maintain a presence on the h-file. Maybe rook h5, for example. And this also takes control of the g5 square. However, rook g8 is what was played. g4, g5, rook f5. Do not play pawn takes pawn here. If you pawn takes pawn, rook takes pawn. And then rook f5 is too late, isn't it? So instead, rook f5. Pawn takes the pawn. Now g5, knight h5. And that's threatening this fork. That would be winning. Rook e5 gives check to gain tempo. That gets a question mark. I like this move. It gives check, and he's ready to pounce on the f7 with the other rook. King d8. Rook does take f7. Knight g3 check. Yeah, this is a better defense. X8 defends the A-man, is defended by the knight. Knight g3 check was played. king e3, h3, rook e7, pigs on the 7th. Note that taking the pawn is inferior. If you take the pawn, h2, and there's no way to stop the promotion, so you're forced to take a repetition, just back and forth. So, instead, put the pigs on the 7th. h2 is played anyway. Note that taking this pawn allows a self-mate. We just take here after king e8 to prevent this rook from coming here. Then you go all the way over here. You got both rooks threatening. So you'd have to play rook d7, splitting the difference, so that if this comes, you can hide here. But then, of course, I'm taking your rook. And all you can do now is stall. Stuff like so. Here we play bishop f7, check, by the way, because it forces, you can't play here because there's the checkmate. So it forces rook takes bishop, and it's just a matter of time here. It's like mate in just a few moves. So let's say knight d6, rook h7, king d8, so that he can block one way or the other. But Forkosaurus, and we grab that, and then we're getting the mate in 2. Okay? So, needless to say, black didn't play that. He played h2, threatening the promotion. Yeah, rook f8 keeps fighting. It seems like a strange move at first glance, but what you're hoping that white will trade rooks here, which is not the best. Better is to play rook d7 and trade rooks here, and then to take the f8 rook. But you're hoping for this. And white is still, well, really, black is still, I should say, black is still fighting either way. Even in this line, black is still fighting. Right, so rook takes h7 was played here, threatening mate, rook c6, rook fd7 check, king c8. I guess this wouldn't do him any good if he ever gets a chance. Rook h7 gets behind the pawn, and now we're threatening checkmate on a8. So king b8 to prevent that. So rook a b7 check. King back to c8, and now bishop takes the rook on g8. He promotes, we take, oh, he didn't take here, he played rook c3 check first. But king d2, rook d3 check, defended by the pawn, king c2, now king takes the b7 rook. He leaves this one here, it's less lethal apparently, although you see the eval bar. Rook e1, the eval bar lunged back this way, even though it got a star. Okay, it's going back up. I mean, the threat is to take this, removing the defender of this rook. So rook d8, bishop c4, now rook h8. Yeah, it's calling for rook d6. I guess on rook d6, I'm going to go ahead and get behind my passer. You have to move your knight, and then I play g6. Promotion square defended by my bishop. So regardless of which way you go with your knight, rook h8 was tried. g6 anyway, rook h2 check, king c3, rook h3, rook e3, knight e2 check, king d2, don't take with the bishop, obviously. I hope you see that, right? And then you have to defend your bishop and lose that pawn. Anyway, knight e2 check, king d2, defending the rook. Rook takes rook. King takes the rook, knight g3, king f4, and black resigned. He's got to forsake this pawn, and it's just a matter of time with 3 pawns extra. So Bobby Fischer just completely outplaying Weinstein in this game. It was a balanced opening. It was a pretty well-fought middle game, but white got the better of the middle game and just completely outmaneuvered his opponent in the endgame. Bobby's accuracy was 94.6 in this game, with a single game rating of 2850. Weinstein's single game rating was 2550, so he played 250 points above his rating, but it wasn't good enough in this game.